Could we have roll call, please, Kelly?
Chairman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderman Plufka, absent. Alderwoman O'Neill. Here. Alderwoman Sims.
Here.
All right, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Any changes, or can we approve by acclamation? Seeing no objection, we'll approve by acclamation. Citizen comment. Kelly, anyone?
No, sir.
Okay, no citizens in attendance. Move on to city administrator report. Bola, do you have anything?
I have no report.
Move on to, I believe this is Dan. We pick up our discussion on golf carts.
Yeah, since the last meeting, I know you'd witnessed, or I guess had been contacted by a constituent about golf carts near your neighborhood. So we put this back on here. I wasn't sure, I'd gone through the different ordinances from other cities and that. I didn't know if there was a particular one that you cared for us to draft together, or if you still wanted it just to table it. Some of the things that I picked apart that if you were going to consider it, are you going to consider operations criteria, headlights, taillights, seat belts, that they have to have proof of insurance, that they would have someone inspected, be it police or someone else, and that they would register it with the city. Those were the main criteria that I had looked at. That's kind of across the board with the different municipalities. Webster Groves has it, and a bunch of other ones that are listed here.
Question I had, Dan, was it looks like some of the municipalities either outright ban your typical golf cart. That's the one that comes off the course. It's got
Right.
no lights, no features whatsoever. It's just a golf cart.
Right.
And then they also have low-speed vehicles. And I guess can you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, I remember seeing it in here. I know that there is a difference in,
I
like
think
you
there's
said,
like
when it-
weight and that type.
part of it's weight, but also part of it's the speed limit. I believe it's 25 miles per hour. Like some of your low-speed vehicles can travel higher than that. Golf carts typically have a governor and can't go beyond, say, I think it's 25. The other thing I forgot to mention was one of the things that some of the others call out, like Eureka and Wentzville, is you can actually prohibit it on certain roads. So I would think like Manchester, Hanley, Brentwood, even though they're not technically ours, they're within Brentwood, and McKnight, I think that would be a foolish maneuver to try to drive during peak time in a golf cart, whether you had headlights and seatbelts or not. There's enough cars on that road, so I would think the way that these other municipalities worked main roads was you can cross perpendicular so long as the speed limit doesn't exceed, say, 30 miles per hour. But you can't travel parallel to some of those roads. So I don't know if you'd want to consider that. The other thing is, I would also say that you would add like that they can't be on the trail system, because as soon as Brentwood Bound is done, I can guarantee you someone's going to think it's neat to drive all over those trails at whatever hour.
Well, I guess what we need to first decide, do we want to ban golf carts altogether? Or do we want to put restrictions on the vehicles to the point where they almost have to have, if you look at some of the other ordinances in here, features like blinkers, seat belts, headlights, almost a regular vehicle. And then from there, who can drive them, and then define where they can go. And, and then if they do something, they violate something, what the fines are gonna be. So I guess the first thing is, do we just want to ban altogether?
Well, I mean, obviously, I hope that history records me as getting the golf cart question right, but I'm not. I just think they should be regulated. I mean, I think they should be. I mean, all of what Dan has been suggesting, I think, sounds very reasonable to me. I don't believe that a golf cart or even a low-speed vehicle should be on Manchester. I mean, that maybe we call. I'll stick with the arterial roads to summon Lee Cannon's vernacular. So, I mean, I think they should be insured. I just happened to be at an event where the guy from whom I get my insurance, I'm like, what is a golf cart? Like, what is that? It's like nothing. I mean, insuring a golf cart is not at all expensive.
Right.
I think, you know, yeah, if you are going to be driving these vehicles off the golf course, you know, blinkers are appropriate, seatbelts are appropriate. I mean, all that I think sounds very, very reasonable to me. So I'm so far of what Dan has been suggesting, I think those all sound like good paragraphs.
Yeah, some of them seem like they're, I don't know, they're obvious, because it says you should carry no more passengers than it's specifically designed to carry. So if it's a four-seater, you don't jam 5 people in there. It says, you know, nobody can like hang on the side of it while it's in motion, you know. And then like Wentzville's, I know it actually says, that's actually got a speed limitation on it. It says, you know, it can be operated on a street or a golf cart lane at a speed of no more than 20 miles per hour. So.
And I think you raise a fair point about Brentwood bound or the trail system that, I mean,
I just know it's a shared use path, and I mean, it's plenty wide enough for a golf cart to scoot underneath the the pedestrian underpass.
and how nice, I mean, it'd be kind of fun. I mean, I'd probably be doing it.
Yeah.
Late at night.
I know what you're thinking.
You know, full disclosure, I can access this trail system from behind my house.
On the way to
so
OB Clark.
I just don't have a golf cart.
Okay, can I throw
Kathy,
my
yeah.
2 cents with it? I'll go further than Sunny. As a bicyclist, I don't like to ride Manchester or Hanley or Brentwood Boulevard, and to me, people in a golf cart are more vulnerable because they're not wearing helmets, and so I'd like to see them banned from crossing or riding on Manchester or Brentwood Boulevard, which confines them pretty much, and on any trails. And so if we set up parameters for speed on things, they're only going to be going 2 or 3 blocks, and that might take care of the issue. But I can't see them with the traffic we have trying to even cross Brentwood. That just sounds totally dangerous to me.
I'd be okay with, I mean, we allow pedestrians to cross Brentwood, so,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, going perpendicular, I think
Yeah.
would be okay.
So-
I'd be okay with that, because,
Yeah.
you know, bicycles can go across Brentwood.
Yeah, but bicyclists wear helmets, and
Not
Well,
all the time.
supposedly.
Since then, I mean, I witnessed right here in front of City Hall, it was a regular golf cart sitting there at Litzinger and Brentwood, cross Brentwood. They had the mother, the father, the mother was holding a kid, and there were 2 kids on the back. And this was a regular golf cart.
And no
going up
helmets.
Litzinger.
No helmets.
Nothing. So I guess it's getting to be an issue. That's the first time I've seen anything. But I guess we could direct Dan to, I guess, come up with, all right, if it's going to be a golf, we're going to allow low-speed vehicles. Then some of these ordinances have what a low-speed vehicle, what features it has to have.
They do, yes.
And then, I guess who can drive? They recommend that it be a licensed driver, can only drive,
Proof of insurance.
proof of insurance. And then a lot of them are limiting driving on streets that are 25 mile an hour or less. So that would keep people off Brentwood, Manchester, and pretty well to our residential streets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just to jump through some of it, would it make sense, like, Dan, could you write, you know, gather up, you know, and show us your most oppressive
Yeah, because the city
ordinance?
attorney's actually
And then
worked on this
I just
for
think,
other
I
clients,
think it's easier
so-
to do surgery than to
Yeah.
think of
Yeah.
like the possibilities. So if I'm looking at, you know, oh, you can't cross the street at Brentwood, well, that's an easy, delete that. I'm okay with that as long as it's at a light or something. You know what I mean? Like that just,
Yeah.
that way I don't
you want, we can
have to
just
use
bring
my
it-
imagination.
So just bring a draft for the next meeting.
Yeah,
Right,
and
right.
so we
Well-
can, you know, if we want to, again, like cut some of it out, that's easier to draft than to think of the
Hadn't
possibilities.
Attorney O'Keefe drafted a rather conservative one for Clayton that we could use as a model?
Yeah, he's worked on other cities, so I think we can cobble the best pieces of some of these. Because I knew one of those, I can't remember which, maybe it was Wentzville, that you had liked, that it said that, you know, bicyclists and pedestrians will have the right of way. So if a golf cart comes up, you know, to an intersection, they'll let the other people go and not try to beat them across there. So some of it seems common sense. And then we can put an implementation date. I know like St. Charles, theirs was last year, but it didn't take effect until January 1, 2021. So we could draft it, bring it here and say effective January 1, 2022, or whatever you decide. That way it gives you time to put it, back and forth or to the board.
Kathy?
No, if we draft it and pass it, I think it should take effect immediately before there's some tragedy out there.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll mention about Brentwood bound, because I know one of the things that one of these had in here, and I can't remember which city it was either, but it basically excluded the city. So if we had a special event, we could run the golf carts on our trail system, but not normal.
I love passing laws I'm not subject to. I think it's great.
Yeah, because they excluded themselves. It said, exemptions, and it said city of X.
Yeah, that would make, on events, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, because you wouldn't want a double standard. Well, why is he there? It's like, well, because it's allowed. They're a city employee on a city golf cart on a city trail.
There is some state legislator who wants to not allow even low-speed electric bikes on the Katy Trail and other trails. So let's make it so that bicycles of a certain speed can, it doesn't exclude those of us with electric bikes.
Okay.
I'm not a millennial, but like speaking of, what are those you can rent that are a bad idea if you're
Oh, a Segway?
over 30? Like,
Yeah, where you stand up.
you stand
and-
on them and you
Yeah.
can rent those,
Yeah,
you
down
would,
at the Arch
and-
Crowns, they have
I mean,
those.
are those allowed on the trail system? Was that qualify as a low speed vehicle? Because it's mechanized.
Yeah, that's
I think when I looked in here, low-speed vehicles were anything over 3 wheels, and I think that's just got 2.
right,
That one.
right. So unicycle or something.
Yeah, I mean, if there's something while we're at it, do
Yeah.
we want those on the trail system? I'm thinking, I don't even know what their
Right.
names are. You can.
Segways.
Segways.
Yeah.
They're not segways. They're like the kids
The
by the
scooters?
colleges.
You're talking about the ones without the handlebar that
scooters and
you
you-
sit on?
you-
I mean,
Electric-
stand on?
Yeah, they've had,
stand on them. They're very dangerous.
the ER doctors see a lot of people
Yeah,
who
you
have been
can.
on
Right.
those.
I can't think of the company, but you basically
Okay.
stick your credit card into it, and then off you can go. And
Mm-hmm.
but they have 2 wheels, but they can go pretty fast.
Kinda like a
I
razor
think we
scooter.
allow them in Brentwood.
Yeah.
No, do we allow them on the trail system?
Well, on our sidewalks.
I don't know if I want to go back that far into the weeds.
I presume if you're going to ride them on the sidewalk, you can probably ride them on the trail. But we do allow them, and Public Works, I think, did approve. We have a contract, actually, allowing a provider, if they would ever, bring them here, to allow our residents and those who work here to ride it.
I think
Like
they're
the Lime bikes.
That's
Yes,
it. Line
that's
bikes.
it.
I can't think of the name.
yeah.
That's it.
And I think they're allowed in our parks.
I think they are.
They are.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Dan, do you have enough direction to draft something for the next meeting?
Yeah, I think so. We'll just bring it back and then figure out, I'll send it to Kevin too. I'll just draft something up and then see what he likes and dislikes and bring you one draft to advance to the next meeting, to the board meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to reports of committee chairs and aldermen. I really have no report except to thank everybody for making this new scheduled date. I appreciate it. Dave's not here. Kathy, any report?
No report.
Sonny, any report?
I have no report.
Move on to department reports. We have the police department. Hi, Chief.
Good evening. Is this on? It's okay. I'm going to start off with the crime report. Kind of good news, bad news. Early in the month, we had a series of car break-ins and car thefts. Brentwood Forest was hit, and our retail areas were hit. This was the first week of August. Since that time, it's gotten very quiet. We've had a few incidents, but been quiet. During that period of time, the last 3 weeks, we've had officers involved in 3 pursuits in which cars ran from them. One was involving an officer that was assaulted in another jurisdiction, but 2 of them were, one was an LPR hit on a stolen auto that the officer was behind and they fled, and then another one off the jury in lot that an officer saw people breaking into cars at the jury inn, and the car took off from them and wouldn't stop. So for the last couple of weeks, we've been pretty quiet at night regarding car break-ins. We did have an incident on the 20th on Van Markway in the apartments of a 14-year-old young lady tragically drowned in the pool. Just wanted to point this out because Corporal Nick Lang was first on the scene, did a fantastic job starting CPR on this young lady. She was not breathing when he got there, and then the fire department showed up and also did a fantastic job. They were able to revive her. However, she was described as brain dead to me by her mother, and she eventually passed away. So she lasted a few days, but she's since passed. So, but the emergency service personnel that showed up at the scene that day did a fantastic job. All of it was captured on Corporal Lang's body camera. The other thing I was going to mention with regard to our nighttime crime, obviously our locations, especially our hotels, are hit at night a lot. And in your packet, BOLA allowed us to include an article from Vicksburg that they enacted a law, excuse me, a ordinance there. This isn't a new idea. In fact, BOLA said that we tried to talk about this some years back. Basically what their ordinance says, if you have parking locations for 25 cars or more, you are required to work with the police department for security cameras. We are very challenged with this. Just as an example, the jury does not have any cameras on their lots or in their parking garage area. So it makes it very difficult for us when we have crime at these locations. That's not to point out just the jury, there are others. Our parking structures in particular, Spring Hill, others, are kind of magnets for late night crime, for car break-ins, and for the occasional robbery. So what we'd like to do is just throw this to you and for consideration. We would be interested in putting together a proposal to you through a memorandum through BOLA, kind of outlining what it would look like, and then have consideration on whether or not that this is something that we want to tackle. There may be resistance. I think BOLA would tell you there was a little resistance. Ironically, I was reading this article in Vicksburg, and there was no resistance from their, well, no outward resistance that we saw, and the companies that they were working with there embraced it. So I think if we look at a 25 parking spot minimum kind of environment, it really limits the number of businesses this affects. The other piece that we could probably tack onto it are calls for police service and police reports written at their locations. Obviously, the hotels, some high crime area as far as theft, Target would be an example. We could probably position this so it's limited to the number of people. They also put a 1-year moratorium on it, so these companies have a year to comply, which I think is more than fair. How they don't have cameras on their lots in 2021 is beyond me to start with. So that's really all I had for the crime. If anybody had any questions or specific incidents that they wanted to ask about. Otherwise, that's all I had for this first part.
Bowl, a little bit of history on parking lot cameras with the commercial areas. What?
Former Alderman Kramer was the first person that suggested this. He had seen something in Dallas whereby they had these tall lights, and I heard people on the board liken it to what you would see in a prison, where it would be, you know, these really bright lights looking down, and they had cameras. So he wanted us to explore whether we could put this in all the commercial districts. We, meaning those property managers, would put it in these commercial districts. And so I approached them, and it wasn't well received. And then since then, I know that Chief Spees also met with the commercial districts in an effort to educate and train them. How do you recognize people that are potentially wanting to steal? And out of all the commercial districts, I think it was just one that seemed to react favorably to it. I did get a call from some of our bigger districts who said that this would not look good for the city and for their patrons especially, if all of a sudden it becomes known that you're patronizing a place that has cameras, because you're also saying there's a lot of not well-received activity going on here, and then it poses liability for them that they're not interested in adding on to their bottom line. So it wasn't well received. So if the direction is going to be to Chief Spees to continue to work on this, I think if you all are interested, it might be good to just test the temperature again to see whether it would be well received. If you look at the demographic and the area of Vicksburg, it's completely different from Brentwood. But I'm sure crime is everywhere.
There are some cities close to us that have enacted, Richmond Heights has an ordinance
Had it.
similar to this.
Okay.
They did it a little differently. They went with any new business license applicants have
Okay.
to do it.
So not existing
Right.
business.
Right. So there's some options there as well. I would tell you that history tells me that spending money on anything when it goes to security for corporations is very difficult. They may tell you that it's a perception issue, but the reality is nobody sees these cameras anyway. It's not a perception issue, it's a money issue for them, so. And ironically, the more problems you have on a parking lot, and we have a couple that, if they get sued over some high-profile crime that happens on their lots, the more you do, the better protected you will be in a lawsuit. It doesn't work the other way, so.
So for Manchester District, the redevelopment area, I think this would be good for that area before any new developer comes, so that they already know the city will require, because there's going to be a parking structure there. So we could say the city would require that any developer that's interested in, developing this area, this is one of the many requirements that the city would have. I like the idea for the business license as well. I think we have potentially 3 new businesses that could easily fall into that category. The hotel, extended stay hotel on Hanley, the kitchen conservatory that will be, moving here eventually, and then the eye doctor down the street. So it might be too late for those 3, but anything new after that, just different parameters from which you all can think about this.
Can you tie, we got that district down there, MC district, so can you tie it to zoning? I mean,
I don't know. I can talk to Whitney about it. I doubt it.
okay.
I doubt it.
Most common way that they tie these are calls for police service and police reports written. The parking lot thing that Vicksburg's doing is a little unique. But and some cities have done housing people, if you have nighttime housing, a hotel, for example, they'll require them to do it because they're magnets for crime, and often they're targets for late night car break-ins in particular, and robberies. So they'll kind of position the ordinance so that those folks have to do it. So there's a lot of different ways that we could play.
And we could talk to, we don't have that many hotels in town. And I know that they're just starting to see a recovery from COVID. And it doesn't look like the cost of these cameras are, cost prohibitive. But I don't know how they would react. They're just recovering, from downturn in the economy based on COVID. So now you throw this on them. So maybe that's where that moratorium comes in.
We did have lengthy conversations with the Jury Corporation about our hotel, and they told us, I think about a year ago, Angie, something like that they were going to go to cameras and do a system in their lots, and COVID hit the bullish point, and it just stopped. So they recognize the need.
I mean, I don't find the stated reasons from what you've said you got from your commercial feedback at all persuasive. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. Like, we have a problem that needs to be addressed, and the idea that if they stick their head in the sand, that somehow it's not going to come back and be a liability to them. I mean, I in this day and age, with our ability to store data better and how cameras get smaller, I think that we could easily create an ordinance where we require the surveillance in a way that it doesn't look like it's not barbed wire that's going around the parking lot. I mean, I think that, perhaps there's some wisdom in drafting the ordinance in such a way that it's not tied to, well, we know this is a high crime area, everybody, so this is why they have cameras, but is there not a way to, go by size of parking lot, so therefore you embrace them anyway, and it's sort of uniformly applied, so maybe that takes some of the stigma away. But I'm not sure that that's even a persuasive position in the first instance. I mean, I would support something like this, but if there was a way to thread a needle where it didn't look like, oh, we're just singling out people who, businesses that have crime, I'd be for softening that. But our sales tax is doing great. I think
Yeah,
that
there were
these-
other
I think
things
these
that
people
were
will
shared with me that I
absorb
can't
it.
say publicly. And that will impact your sales tax.
So, I don't know. I would support an ordinance like this. I need better data points than I'm curious as to why you don't feel like you can say things publicly, but
Well, because certain things are confidential, that's why.
I mean, I guess how does a commercial occupant have an expectation of privacy when talking?
If what
to
I
you?
say will impact their bottom line, then it does.
Okay, well, we can visit that another later, but I'm for it.
Kathy?
Yeah, I think the same thing, and I find that same argument not valid. I think for women especially, knowing a camera is there is another layer of protection, especially in parking garages. So I would think a business would want to say to its customers, we want your safety above all, and this is a way to keep you safer. So I can't see that that's an argument. My question would be, how many parking spaces does the credit union across the street have? Some of that might be subjective rather than
Yeah,
a
and
number.
it doesn't mean 25 is the number either. It could be 50. I mean, it just depends on really what the mission of the ordinance is.
Yeah.
If you really are targeting late-night locations, then upping the number of parking spots may accomplish that, so. And we're going to talk later about other security systems that add a layer of additional protection that we can interact with immediately in law enforcement that would be a huge advantage to us, because a lot of these cars that do this crime at night are done in stolen cars.
Well, it sounds like we're supportive of, maybe coming back to the next meeting with some type of a rough draft.
Okay.
And as Sonny said with golf carts, throw it all at us and we'll see what we want to stick.
Okay, we will do
And
that.
go from there.
Thanks.
All right, move on to fire department. Who do we got? Chief Cottrell?
Good evening. Pull up my report. Right, so I presented the report for the agenda, and glad to stand here and say our hiring process continues to progress. We did extend a conditional offer this afternoon to a young gentleman, so we hope to bring him forward in the next couple of weeks. And then we do have an eligibility list of some remaining members, so if we have any openings in the future, we'll cut that time down to bring them on board. The past month, our crews have focused on some boat and swift water training. Didn't know we were going to get to use it yesterday, but we did. What I'd like to highlight with this was we did this in conjunction with the St. Louis County Special Ops out at the Missouri River. And for the first time in the prior years, we haven't experienced this, but our partners from Maplewood, Clayton, Ladue, and Brock Hill all participated with us. They're making commitments as well to send their folks to training, this advanced training, and to be able to help. We've made significant investment in equipment. Now they're making some investments in personnel to help with that response. So it's very much appreciated. There's more to come on this next item with the FDA approval of the Pfizer vaccine. We do know Richmond Heights Vaccination Clinic is going to reopen at some point in September. The logistics are still being worked out, but they have asked for our assistance again. The hours will not be the same as previous. Just they're targeting different groups, the at-risk groups, and also the younger aged children that have not had the vaccine before. So there's more to come on that, but I just wanted to provide the information that we are going to be doing third doses and then still targeting those that have not received the vaccine.
The fire department strategic planning process, we're moving forward with that. We are meeting with our crews this week and doing some internal data collection, SWOT analysis. What you will be seeing, hopefully next week, we're going to send out information and surveys requesting feedback from our external stakeholders. With that being said, each elected official is going to receive the link to fill out the survey. And what we're going to ask is that you choose 2 residents from your ward to also receive this link. There are many others that are included from our business districts, faith-based community, schools, Brentwood Forest, for example, homeowner associations. So we're trying to get a nice cross-section of Brentwood and representation from Brentwood to complete this survey and help us gather information so we can improve our services to the residents. So there'll be more to come on that next week. Just a follow-up report on the August 12th storm that hit Brentwood. I know you're probably up to speed with most of what occurred. Brentwood was hit hard, specifically compared to our neighbors. We had dramatic increase of responses in Brentwood, so many at one time that not all of our equipment could even respond to those incidents. So we had some mutual aid partners respond to calls that we were not able to even get to. All calls were answered. It took us a few hours, but everything was addressed. All the information was forwarded to the proper utility companies. Most significant was the house on Powell. The resident did have to be rescued from that house. The firefighters did an amazing job on that with limited resources because everybody was busy. Unfortunately, that house was unfit for occupancy, so that was the most severe in Brentwood incident. 2 additional items I added that have come up since the agenda was posted in the preparation for Hurricane Ida. The FEMA response, they deployed Missouri Task Force 1 as an urban search and rescue team. We did send a firefighter on that team. He left Friday about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They arrived in the middle of the night in Louisiana, and they are currently on mission in Louisiana assisting those resources, as well as a few other of our neighboring firefighters went. There's about a 100-person team that went down there to assist. And then to highlight back up towards the top, we did experience significant rainfall yesterday afternoon. We did receive a call for flooding in Brentwood. Upon our arrival, everybody was safe. The creek did not rise and create this. This was just runoff from the rain. But we did run multiple other calls in neighboring jurisdictions in Kirkwood and in Webster Groves. So we continue to experience that. Do you have any questions?
Questions? Chief, on the hire, so we were down to 5 candidates and you've made a selection.
Correct.
Can you tell us if that person is coming from the academy or an existing city or?
He is a graduate of the St. Louis County Fire Academy, and he currently is employed as a paramedic.
Okay.
He's not working for a fire department.
And how many did we start out with on the list?
We had 17 applicants. And through testing processes and interviews, this is what we narrowed it down to.
Any other questions? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the other department, be Public Works. Dan, did you have anything tonight?
2 things that had popped up. They'll be in the weekly report too, but Pine Avenue, those speed cushions that we talked about before, those have been ordered, so we're awaiting delivery. Based on the last delivery schedule, it's probably end of September, beginning of October. So that's to be expected. That's about how long it took on Rosalie. And then an update on Rosalie. I know you guys are aware that the board passed the contract with Krupp, and then that'll improve the sidewalk and street lighting on the south side of Rosalie between Swim Club and Brentwood Boulevard. The one thing we're waiting on, though, is the notice to proceed from MoDOT. So they approved the contract, but they still have to issue notice to proceed. We'll set up a pre-construction meeting. We'll put together a message, a public service announcement through the communications manager and push that out. And then if need be, we can have an open house too. It should be pretty straightforward. It's just sidewalk and lighting on that first block. So that's it.
Questions? Thanks, Dan. Yep. All right, we'll move on to consent agenda. We have the minutes from, I believe, April, May, and June. I might make sure that that's correct. Yes, April, May, and June Public Safety Committee meetings. Can we just approve the consent agenda by acclamation? All right, that's what we'll do. Moving on to old business. I think, Chief Spees, you're back up to talk about the CLIA recertification for 2021.
Yes, sir. Kevin Boschert and Jim McIntyre, can you come up, please? Real briefly, I just wanted to cover the CALIA recertification and point out that Kevin, who's here as a contracted employee with the City of Brentwood, former sergeant with Florissant Police Department and an expert in the CALIA process, and his cohort here, Major McIntyre, near and dear to your hearts. These two have done a fantastic job since 2017 or so, getting the city's police department ready for CALIA. So I wanted to point out the fact that we recently have gone through our year recertification process, headed for the 4-year in a couple of years. But I'm going to ask Jim to briefly explain to you what I hear about every day, and that's proofs, and what a proof is in the CALIA world. And Kevin can talk to you as well. They do this every day. So we have a lot of general orders, and CALIA's got a lot of missions that, dots over the I's that have to be done. These two do it. They bring it to Angie and then to me, and they ask that we readjust our policies or what a proof really is, and that is we are doing what we're supposed to do in terms of the CALIA process. Jim, you want to speak to what you do with those proofs every day real briefly, please?
Thank you, Chief. The proofs of compliance are just simply that just proves that we are in compliance with the CALIA standard. For example, I think the Chief talked about we had 3 pursuits, so we have a pursuit policy. Part of that policy requires a pursuit report. There are 4 signatures on that report. There's a number of boxes. Mr. Boschert was kind enough to assemble that police report, and that's one of the proofs of compliance that is required every time. So that's just one bullet of one standard. There's 189 that we're required to adhere to because we're in Tier 2. There's also 484 standards if we wanted to be Tier 1. We're not a big enough department really to handle that. They talk about prisoner processing and those sorts of things. But we are in, technically right now, we're in year 3 of a 4-year process. Once we were accredited in 2019, it starts all over. Matter of fact, it started that very next day where Kevin and I basically got our heads together. And sometimes events that occur throughout the year, major events, specifically the events that occurred in Minneapolis last year, that changes, that dictates what our industry does, and CALIA is no different. As a result of that, the use of force in CALIA was changed dramatically. So we altered our policies. Most of them, quite frankly, were already in compliance, but there was a couple little tweaks that we had to do. We just met with our CSM, which is a client service member, which basically what they do is they come in remotely. All of our policies, all of our proofs of compliance are online. They're in a cloud, and we basically give that assessor a key to get into our system. He looks at everything. And full disclosure, Sergeant Boschert is he is our accreditation manager. There can only be one, and Kevin is appointed as that. So Kevin dealt directly with him. You may have the report in your packet, but we are in full compliance with that for year 2. We have 2 more of those to do, and then they will come back and visit with us in February of 2023. They'll actually do what they call a site assessment, where they'll ride with our officers, They'll speak to elected officials, they'll speak to our city administrator, our courts, and it's about a 2-day process there, and then they'll compile a large report, probably larger than the one you have in front of you, and then they'll decide, it'll go in front of a commission, and they'll decide whether we meet the compliance. But so far, for year 2, we're still batting 1,000, so everything looks good thus far, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have one. So when, on the executive summary, when it says site assessment was not completed, that's because this year there just isn't a site assessment done?
Correct. CALEA switched to a 4-year process, and so they only come in the last year. So as Kevin and I were talking, they're actually coming in January of 2023. I'm sorry, they're going to do a CSM, a virtual assessment, and then they're actually going to come on site in February. It's kind of odd, but that's how CALEA, they tell us when they're doing it, so we just kind of answer to the orders they give us.
And then I guess in that summary, out of the thousands, I don't even know how many encounters you all have, there's just 2 that they wanted some action taken on.
Right, so if you're referring to the year 2 remote web-based assessment. Right, where it says standard issue on standard 4.1.5. Right, and that refers to some of the verbiage that we had. That's chapter 4 is use of force, and there was some verbiage that they had some questions about, and Kevin dealt directly with Mr. Moretto, former chief of police, who was our assessor. After they talked, we did revise our general order. We showed it again. We give him full access to our policies. He reviewed it, and he was satisfied with it. The second one there also says standard issue. Unfortunately, and I can let Mr. Boschert speak to this, but Mr. Moretto had closed his assessment before he wrote that we had become in compliance with that. So Mr. Boschert had reached back out to him.
Thank you, and I appreciate being here tonight. Those issues were verbiage issues that they wanted us to strengthen the general order that we had. So we did that immediately when it was brought to our attention. We had 45 standards that he reviewed, and the majority of them were anything dealing with use of force, obviously because of what occurred in Minneapolis there, stressed use of force. So when he reviewed those, he mentioned a couple of areas that we needed to strengthen. And again, as the major said, the second one, we made those changes immediately on it, but he forgot, as he told me on the phone. I called him after we looked at the report, and I said, you know, we took care of those issues because we want to make sure that we're in compliance with everything. And he says, yes, you did. I said, well, it doesn't mention it in your report. And he goes, oh, darn it. So he went back in, got a hold of CALEA, was able to get back in, make that changes on this assessment, but we don't have a copy of that assessment. Just so you know, though, they were taken care of immediately, so we're in compliance.
Thanks for your help on all that, Kevin.
I'm sorry?
Thanks for your help with this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Guess that's it. Thanks, guys. Chief, I think you're sticking around for some new business on the officer wellness program.
Yes, we, over the last year, the majors and myself have been reviewing what the Brentwood Fire Department does for wellness with their firefighters and paramedics, along with other things or other programs that are in law enforcement today. This is something that's become more popular. Cities and police departments becoming more proactive when it comes to the health, both mental health and physical well-being of their officers, especially in law enforcement because of the nature of the job and the stress and the physical challenges and the shifts and things like that. So we mirrored what Ronnie and the fire department did for wellness for the fire department to some degree, but the jobs are a little different. So we tweaked it a bit in terms of, especially in terms of what the physical assessment by a doctor of the officers would be. Ironically, as we were working our way through this for the last few months, Bold and I talked, she brought it up to me about 6 weeks ago and asked whether or not we were considering doing a wellness program. So we were about 90% through this when she asked. So here it is in front of you this evening. I want to thank Major Hawkins. She was Angie's very passionate about this topic anyway. She actually prepared some of this documentation. Angie, can you come up, please? And she'll be here with me to answer any questions that you have. But what I wanted to point out to you is that if you look at the attachment that you have with regard to the memo that Angie prepared, there's a little diagram here that I think really speaks to the program very specifically and really gives you an overall understanding of what we were driving towards. And that's the little bubbles that Angie made. It's on page 2 of her memo. Really, this is a 4-pronged approach. Most of these programs are 2- and 3-pronged. We wanted to add 2 to it. The primary one that is mandatory for the officers would be a mental health screening that's required yearly. We didn't want to make this real invasive, but we did think that it was important enough to make it mandatory. So basically what that looks at like is that the officers were required once a year to contact somebody from PASS and have a conversation for 30 minutes about their life. If there's an opportunity or a need or a want to talk further about something that may be bothering them, and it could be something outside the job, it could be a divorce or whatever it may be. If it's inside the job, also is something that they are available to talk with the officers with. These people were trained in this area specifically for law enforcement issues and challenges. So that would be prong 1, so to speak, of the program would be that mental health checkup piece. The second piece would be a physical assessment. The fire department does this where their firefighters go to doctors and they go through a series of tests that are specific to what they do for a living, and ours would be similar. It's laid out in the memorandum that Angie prepared, so I won't go through it specifically. There are things for aging, which is kind of cool in the program. So, you know, PSA testing for men is just an example. But there's a series of tests that they will screen you for, and then as you age, screen you for some others. So that would be an optional piece, and I think, you know, as Angie went through each officer and interviewed him, what we found was that the younger officers tend to think that it's not that important, and people like me that are aging think it's really important. So at any rate, there were 20 officers, right? 20 out of our 29 thought that they would probably take advantage of that piece of the program. The two other bubbles that you see there is an in-house physical training process. So Sergeant Gibson would be probably challenged with this if this is accepted by the board to create a program of. We have a lot of in-house discussion about what would be tested because we want it to be fair. We want it to be fair for both men and women. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where someone gets hurt. But we're thinking of, just as an example, a mile run would be included in this. So there'd be a series of physical challenges that they would be trained for over a period of time, months, and then tested. And that would be a piece of the program. And then the last piece is something that's really begun seeing more popularity in law enforcement, and that's physical training for ground control, wrestling, kind of a jiu-jitsu kind of approach, martial arts training. And the reason why we think that's important for our officers is not only obviously for their own safety and health, but it can de-escalate situations where we don't get into a scenario where an officer's completely exhausted, spent, and unable to control a prisoner, and you may get into a violent encounter that may lead to a shooting. So the more trained they are in terms of hand control and physical control of people, if you've ever seen someone that's martial arts trained versus somebody that's drunk, high, and tough, they can control these people very well if they know what they're doing, just with hands-on. So there's big value to this in law enforcement, especially in today's world. So there's only a few officers at this point that really wanted to take advantage of that, and it would be on their own with a training process and company that they would select and that we would allow them to go to as part of the program. So that's really the 4-pronged approach. The cost of the program is outlined. So the biggest piece of that, cost-wise, will be obviously the physical health assessment piece. It's a little over $16,000, which is close to what the fire department's paying. I think ours is a little less because we have a few less tests than they do. So that is the most expensive piece of this. The mental health support piece was very cost effective at a 30-minute yearly visit for each officer. If anybody any questions, Major Hawkins or myself would be happy to answer them.
I guess I did, Chief. Why not go mandatory?
Well, something we talked about over and over with, haven't we, Major? Angie supports going mandatory. I don't think it was a good idea to go fully mandatory with the program. And I think the biggest reason is that I think there's a bit of a liability issue there to start with, and that I was part of in the city police department, an officer that collapsed and died doing a fitness program, mandatory. And it cost the city a lot of money, and it was, the liability issue was significant. That's a piece of it. And part of this is, I think, is this wellness program, if people don't embrace it, it's really not all that effective. So we're really, and Angie's done a good job with trying to talk this up to the officers. It's being well received, and I think it's going to eventually be full compliance. I really think that it will. Initially, that was the first blush of responses, and most of the younger folk. And the other piece of it, we got some people that are in really good shape, that go to the doctor, that they really tend to themselves. So their attitude on it is, I'm taking care of myself, I don't need this, which is fine, and I think that's okay. And if they were standing here today, I think you would probably see what I'm talking about. These are people that are in really good shape, that, you know, they're on good diets. I wouldn't want to fight them coming out of a police car. So, so that's another one of the reasons it's a given the choice.
And then would this be in the 2022 budget year?
Yes, sir. We would ask to start it in January of next year.
In the recommendation, it says $1,000 per officer. I'm just trying to figure out the numbers here. Okay.
Go ahead, Angela.
How these all add up, because
Yes,
they're
sir.
throwing a lot of numbers at us here.
If you're looking at the martial arts training piece of it, you mean?
Well, if I look just under your recommendation, is that just is that just the PSA?
That right there is specific to the martial arts training. The reason that there was a cost associated specifically to that was because we kind of wanted to offer the officers the ability to go get that training at a place that they chose. And you look around at the different places, and the general cost for an annual membership is right around $1,000. And our thought was, okay, this year I've polled our officers. We have 5 officers who are interested in this program. If we did offer them $1,000 a year for that, it would be $5,000, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I apologize for the confusion. I kind of see what you mean in the recommendation portion there. That 1,000 is, again, specific to the martial arts training.
Okay. So the whole program would be the 22,600, all these segments of the program.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All righty, well, what are you needing from us? Is this something, Bola, that we need a policy for?
Yes, because that's what the city did for the fire department program.
I think the fire department, or the city for the fire department enacted an ordinance, if that's
Right.
correct, ma'am, and basically put into effect the wellness program.
So we would need to go to the board.
Okay. So I'd entertain a motion to go to the full board with the recommendation for the wellness program for the police department.
So moved. Second.
Jinx. Whichever.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Do you need to roll call us?
No, not in a committee. All, yeah. Anyone opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Final note on that, we'd like to thank the fire department because we bugged them extensively on this.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move, Chief, I guess you're still up because now we're going to talk about the Flock security camera.
Sorry for eating up most of your time here.
That's all right.
Last item we had was the discussion on a new camera system. Just to give you some background on this, I've been aware of this Flock camera system. I don't have any connection to these people. I've just been watching what they do. There is some technology based in license plate reader technology that's out there. In fact, we use it through Avigilon, and it works well. This is kind of LPR on steroids. So when you look at the flock system, they've kind of perfected, so to speak, what their cameras can do for law enforcement and to protect neighborhoods. So they came in and gave us a presentation, and when they gave us their presentation, there were a couple things that really caught our attention with their systems. One, it's a live feed directly to law enforcement. So if there's a hit on an LPR, a stolen car that comes into Brentwood, our officers would know within probably about 10 to 15 seconds. Their mobile terminals are going to light up and say, you got a stolen car. An example of this happened about a week ago with Officer Seth Mundorf. He got an LPR hit. We only have one car that has LPR on the police car. But Seth was driving, just running, riding the streets and patrolling, and a stolen car came through Brentwood. And he turned on it and tried to stop it, and it fled from him. That's an example of what these flock cameras, if they're deployed, these are stationary cameras, but they can be moved. So if you choose to deploy the cameras in a particular area, but you need to move them around, you can do that. We could also position one on a trailer if we wanted to do that. We have a LPR trailer right now. We could put this on our speed trailer if we wanted to and deploy the speed trailer with an LPR. Makes it even more portable or mobile. What they do is they have a team that comes in and they put it on an existing pole. Ameren often works with them. One of the catches here is if you go onto a road that's not controlled in by the city of Brentwood, it lengthens the time that it takes to get approval. So MoDOT is particularly lengthy. May take a month or two to get MoDOT to approve it. But their techs, once it's approved, come out and they will deploy it where we ask them to do that. We met with Flock after we had the initial debriefing. And again, City of Eureka, City of Clayton, there's several cities around us. Wentzville is using these extensively. So I've talked to the chiefs in all of those cities, and they really like this program. So they came in, and we picked out 7 locations that we thought were the most strategic for patrol that aren't locations that are in private neighborhoods like Brentwood Forest or York Village, things like that. Obviously, if you're going to deploy them, say in York Village or Brentwood Forest, then that would be on the community there to pay for that. Sergeant Simpson's right now presenting this to the Brentwood Forest folks at their meeting tonight, just to give them an education on what the system does. Cost-wise, we've shown you the cost. I did want to correct something on that cost. This is a subscription-based program, like all good technology companies are trying to get to. So the recurring revenue piece is what they're after here. So it's $2,500 per camera per year, so which is pretty fairly priced for this style of technology, I think. There is what was missing in the memo that is not in there is it's $250 one-time fee to deploy the camera by their techs. So if each camera that you deploy, it's a $250 fee, and then $2,500 for the calendar year whenever you put it up would be the cost for the cameras. So the memo that you saw, it's 17,000, and we, just for the purposes of depicting this to you in terms of where we could deploy them, we picked 7 cameras as a request to look at. So in the budget, when we talked to BOLA about this, we would ask to look at it this year. It may take 2-3 months to get them deployed anyway, but get the ball rolling at this point. You're looking at about $17,500 yearly cost for 7 cameras. That doesn't mean we have to do 7 cameras. That's the cost of 7, and you can do the math on however it looks to you. So we certainly could prioritize 3 locations or 4 locations and start with that, and then see how the system works if that's a decision that's made. The last thing I was going to mention about this is that these are searchable cameras, which is really kind of cool for our detectives. This is an example of the homicide we had a couple months ago up at the Drury Inn. We had no external cameras, either at the Bonefish or the Drury, so we had no opportunity. Nothing was on video, other than up until the time that the murder occurred. There was nothing of the murder on a video. If the flock cameras would catch things like that, there's all kinds of ways to do investigative efforts by the detectives. For example, if we have an armed robbery at the in front of the library at 2 in the morning and a flock camera is up somewhere on Brentwood Boulevard, which is what happened a couple, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now, they can go in and search for a white Mercedes, for example, without a plate, into this flock system and say, give me all the, because the system it learns vehicles. So it knows what a white four-door Mercedes looks like, the software does. And they can query it on that evening for any white Mercedes that passed, and then likely get a license plate in that manner to work. So that's just an example, but those are investigative leads that we just don't have right now. So to be able to go back into these flock cameras, it's not only real-time bang for your buck, but you're getting the back-end investigative piece with them as well. So, any questions on the flock system?
I do. Can you tell me what the range of the camera is, so that if it were put on a pole by O.B. Clark's, it could cover Brentwood, O.B. Clark's parking lot, the exit from the shopping center?
As one of the challenges with the system, and a great question, that's one of the challenges with the system. Currently, and their software's about to change, currently they can cover a little more than a lane of traffic. So if you deploy this south on Brentwood Boulevard, for example, coming off of 64, you would get the fast lane if you wanted. Now, within the next couple weeks, they're being able to widen their lens scope, that they'll be able to cover the entirety of Brentwood southbound. So it's getting better, but like all technology, it's, they're a work in progress. But that is one of the challenges of the system is how much you can cover. So deploying something like the flock camera to watch a parking lot is not a good idea, but to watch the entrance of a parking lot is a great idea. Brentwood Forest, as you look at the entrances, the 3 primary entrances to Brentwood Forest, one camera can cover each of those 3 entrances in theory, especially as they're able to spread out now and be wider. But each of those ingress areas into Brentwood Forest can be covered. So if it's 3 in the morning and somebody comes in off of Brentwood into Brentwood Forest and the plate hits, our officers will know within about 15 seconds there's a stolen car that went into Brentwood Forest off of Brentwood Boulevard. So that's the value of them.
Yeah.
And they are stationary, but they're movable, so we can do that. I think there's these stationary cameras we've talked about in this meeting. And Alderman Lockmeal, I know you've asked about this several times. These are the cameras, stationary cameras, as we look at the current technology that we think are most effective.
And there's not a discount for multiple purchases, huh?
No, we asked that. We said if we get to 10, is there a discount down to 2,000? They don't do that. It's 2,500 if you get 100. I think Wentzville's, I don't know how many they've got, but they're up around 100, I think. But they're $2,500 each one, and they won't budge.
You're wanting to buy them this year?
We'd like to get the ball rolling. They sent us a contract that just, 7-camera contract. We told them that there's a process to this, but yeah, I think it makes sense because I think we're looking at probably 3 months at the earliest before they would ever get deployed because of the routes that we want to cover. So we're going to have to get MoDOT involved, and it's going to take a while. Whereas if Brentwood Forest or York or private neighborhood or whatever, they could turn these around in a couple weeks.
Well, would we be able to use the ARPA funds that we just got for the purchase this year?
I'd need to look into that, I'm sure, to confirm without having looked at, what the regulations are. Obviously, that's one funding source. I think there are others that are mentioned in the memo. And Dan, would you like to address that? Because we would be relying on Dan's capital improvement fund to purchase all 7 this year because he has savings. Is that correct? As we speak. So there is savings in the capital improvement fund because of savings in some of Dan's projects to the American Rescue Plan Act. I need to look at the regulations there to see whether that would be a funding source. Right now, I think it could be. So you have multiple to
And then
choose from.
Going forward, we just have to build it into the budget.
Right.
Kathy, did you have something? Okay, do we need to take this to the full board, or,
If the direction is to go forward with it and purchase it from savings in the capital, yeah.
that's a motion, I guess.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Thank you.
All right, moving on, I guess this is Chief, is it you, Chief Cottrell, the participation in the GEMT?
Correct. Prepared a memo. We've participated, I believe this is our third consecutive year. We're requesting to participate in the Missouri GEMT program. This is a reimbursement program by the federal government for Missouri Medicaid patients that we transport with our ambulance. There's no out-of-pocket cost to the city. We do recover a deposit that we make to the state of Missouri, and we have realized between $60,000 and $90,000 each year while participating in that program. I was on the phone today with our consultant. We've provided some data to them for fiscal year 21 collection. However, we do need to extend the contract that we're currently under for them to complete that work. We're under contract through September 8th, so if we could have approval, we could move this to the September 7th Board of Aldermen meeting.
Any questions for the chief? So Chief, in 2021, it generated $133,000, of which we got 78,000.
Correct. Now, what I learned today, those are not audited numbers.
Okay.
She believes the audit would come back probably favorable to Brentwood, where we may realize even slightly more.
All right, motion to forward on to the full board the request to extend the contract with EMS/MC.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right,
All right, thank you.
thanks, Chief. All right, move on to citizen comment. Anybody, Kelly? All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thanks, everybody.